Passionate but peaceful. The nationwide Hikoi today finally arriving at Parliament after a 9-day journey.
Take number one, and hopefully the only take. What I want to talk to you about today is political misinformation and the digital age, and how analog photography can combat this. 2024 could be considered the year of politics, and there has been a lot of change this year, including here in New Zealand. The controversial Treaty Principle Bill has brought about one of the largest protests in New Zealand in recent memory. Now, this isn't a political channel, so I'm not going to talk about the politics behind this, but what I am going to talk about the digital age, misinformation, and how our analog world can combat this. And I would not be the best person to speak to about the politics behind the Hikoi. I'm going to post links below that better explain the political ongoings in my country. What I want to talk to you about today is political misinformation and the digital age, and how analog photography can combat this. Now, we live in the digital age. I was there for the transition, and when I was growing up, it was going to be an age of information. Little did we know that it would become an age of misinformation. Now, with the likes of Twitter, YouTube, and co, global misinformation can spread quite incredibly quickly. This is a thing that always existed, but this toxic inception has become more prevalent. So how do we go ahead and combat this age of misinformation? Well, I've been thinking about this lately, and I have a solution. What if we relied on the mediums that we used before that did not allow such misinformation to spread so rapidly? Whilst we cannot fully combat this as it is now the digital age, analog does have something to say. Now, this is a roll of slide film, and this is a slide photo that I recently took in Shibuya in Japan. Now, the thing about slide photography is that, as you can see here, it's pretty damn true to life because it is essentially the image that was captured at the time, and you can see it clearly. I'm not going to go into the technical details of what a slide is. I'll go ahead and link a few videos below, but essentially, unlike a color negative or a black and white negative, this is that moment captured true. You can see the negative, or should I say positive here, clearly, especially when you go ahead and project it on a slide or on a light table. It is pretty infallible to being the truth. Now, whilst these can be manipulated, the people that were able to manipulate it no longer really exist and basically died a long time ago, just like film photography once dominating the market. Now, in this digital age with AI, we can't really trust anything. But for me, I think slide film might be the best medium that we have to combat misinformation. Unlike a negative, a slide is positive and captures a true image. These are archival evidence of what you've shot, but they have to be inverted first for you to go ahead and use them as images. And they're harder to be a sense of proof because you can't see the images in their true color. Everything looks very strange and all negative. Whereas these slide photos, they're evidence. However, you can see them very clearly in what they're actually supposed to be. This is good evidence for non-tampering. So if we're going to provide evidence of a photo that we've taken, this medium here is much better than the digital world or even the negative world. Because let me tell you something, raw files can be manipulated. Many do not know this, but they are not a medium to be trusted because they are digital data. There are lots of malicious actors out there who can go ahead and manipulate them. But there are very few, if any, people out there that are able to manipulate slide photos, in particular to the degree that digital can be manipulated. So my proposal is pretty simple and clear. Slide photography is what we can use to go ahead and combat misinformation. It's both physical, hard to replicate, and a good archival medium to store history. Most people do not know this, but most of our archiving that's actually done to store things long term is still pretty analog. Digital hard drives such as this one have a limited lifespan. This one here is about 10 years old, and that would be pretty much hitting the end of its lifespan. These slide photos, on the other hand, as long as they are stored in good conditions, will last anywhere between 50 to 100 years, more than our lifetime potentially. Now, I originally didn't plan to go to the Hikoi, partly because I was working on that day, but I changed my mind because I quickly realized the significance and importance of that historic event, and I believed it should be captured on slide film. Because as I just mentioned, slide film is a great archiving source, and that's what I want to do, to capture moments for long-term historical context to provide to future generations, but also to keep as a source of truth. Recently I was told a story by someone who mentioned that their computer got hacked and they could physically see it. Now, I'm not going to go into those details, but if I go ahead and take a photo on film, even negative film, those archives are going to be something that someone has to search for if they're going to go ahead and remove that from history. If you go ahead and photograph something digitally, you can be attacked digitally. A virus just needs to sit around on your computer and then just destroy all your stuff. However, someone physically has to come destroy your stuff if it is physical, and that makes it so much harder. Now, I went to the Hikoi because I knew it was a significant moment. And I went with this camera. This is my one-of-a-kind pano camera. Now, whilst there was a few other people that went ahead and took film photos, not many of them would have taken one with a camera like this. This takes true 35mm pano photos. What that means is it takes a much larger panoramic image than your normal traditional 35mm photo or even a digital photo. After all, I am an artist and I wanted my work to stand out. Now, the other camera that I took was this one here. This is my Minolta 500 SI. This was my very first film camera, and these are great. They meter really well. And that meant that I was able to take some film photos on this camera as well as a just in case. Because this camera here is a one-of-a-kind manual camera and relies on zone focusing, and it relies on me metering very well because it doesn't have any metering inbuilt into it. Now, I like to go to the extreme, so I would recommend that if you're going to shoot slide photos of events, to capture them truly and archive them for a longer term and provide a better form of truthful photographic journalism, you might want to go ahead and use this instead. These cameras are pretty cheap, they are pretty reliable, and if they do break, like I said, they're pretty cheap and you can easily replace them. They meter quite well, so you basically can rely on them to expose correctly, in particular with slide film, which is much more difficult to expose with versus normal negative film. Now, I've spent a lot of time capturing my year and archiving it on slide film, and I had about half a roll left from about this point onwards, and I finished off the rest of my roll and archived the Hikoi. These photos came out pretty damn well for the most part, and shooting with the Minolta allowed me to expose them correctly, pretty darn easily, and I was able to capture the images even though slide film is generally more difficult to shoot with. This was a historical occasion, and I captured it not in just my own point of view, but in a particular medium that gave it a difference. There are going to be more protests to come, not just here in my own country, but in yours. And if you go ahead and you photograph events such as these, I would implore you to consider shooting slide film. Whilst it's expensive, it is a medium that is difficult to touch. It is a medium that is difficult to fake. As you can see by my hand going behind these photos, AI cannot do that. If you're only going to see these photos via the digital medium of the internet, the skill set to fake slide photos by a digital team is at such a high cost point that no one's going to go ahead and do it. This medium here gives you something else as a photographer that many do not get to experience, and that is a true sense of touch. Those moments in time captured truly, because that's what this slide film is. You can literally hold in your hand moments in time. And you can't do that with negative film because you can't see it truly. And you definitely cannot do that with digital because with digital is a copy of a copy of a copy and just zeros and ones at the end of the day. I really implore my fellow photographers to think about this, both in the digital and the analog world. Whilst digital provides a very quick, snappy resolution and you can provide photos very quickly to media and journalists, it does come with its downside and it comes with its drawbacks. Likewise, film does take time and is not a very quick solution. Even for those that shoot street photography and can shoot it black and white and quickly go ahead and develop it themselves, there's still about a 4-hour delay at the quickest from developing, letting it sit, scanning, and going ahead and then editing in a computer, then from them to turn into digital photos essentially to be provided to the world. We have often forgotten in this quick age of information that moments in time have an impact long term, and we don't necessarily need to act as quickly to get a message across or to capture things with significant impact. There are still photos out there today that have more of an impact in our minds, such as the Afghan girl, and have way more cultural significance, and yet they are considered historically old by now. Now I'm going to go ahead and try and embed this into my photography as well, not just thinking about the archival process. Slide photography is a form of photography that can last not just moments in time, but decades and even generations. And that's why I use this medium, because that's what I want to do. I want my photography to last not just these little moments, these memes and everything else. I want it to last generations. I want it to make an impact. As always, it's been real, guys.